Mr. Nice and Amp, Mr. Unheroic, When Good Manners Go Bad, Act Y, Britain's Nicest Man, Chapter 1. The Apology Olympics, in which Nigel apologizes to 42 objects, 3 humans, and 1 decorative fern, before 9 a.m. There are people who greet the morning with gratitude. Birdsong, sunrise, joy, all that inspirational calendar nonsense. Nigel Pendergrass greets the morning with an apology. "Sorry," he murmured to the alarm clock as he silenced it. He always felt guilty for pressing its buttons too abruptly. "Didn't mean to wake you so harshly," voice 1. "Nice, Nigel. I truly don't wish to be burdensome to inanimate objects. They have enough on." He tiptoed across the carpet as if performing reconnaissance in enemy territory, because even his own footsteps felt impolite. By the time he reached the bathroom sink, he had apologized to the floorboard that creaked under him, the toothpaste tube he squeezed too aggressively, and the mirror for having to witness his morning hair, which resembled an abandoned bird nest experiencing an existential crisis. There were people in London who lived boldly, people who strode through the world believing every space was theirs to occupy proudly. Nigel was not one of them. He was the sort of man who said, "Excuse me," to coat hangers if they became entangled. The kind of man who, during a storm, whispered sorry to raindrops he felt he had collided with too abruptly. And today, tragically, was not an exception. As he descended the stairs of his modest North London flat, he passed his neighbor's door, Dr. Tallulah Spinster, from which an ominous blue glow pulsed like a nightclub for unsettled ghosts. Something fizzled. Something hissed. Something yelped. Nigel quickened his pace. Voice 1. "Nice, Nigel. Best not disturb her. Whatever she is doing sounds alive, and possibly in pain. I hope it's not the iguana again." He reached the ground floor, opened the main door, and froze. A decorative building fern blocked part of the entrance, leaning dramatically as if it had fainted. "Oh dear," Nigel whispered. "I'm terribly sorry. I didn't see you there." He stepped around it gingerly, like a man navigating a minefield made entirely of feelings. Outside, London was doing what London does best at 7:45 a.m. being slightly annoyed at everything. Nigel walked toward the bus stop, mentally preparing for the daily marathon of polite suffering. His first competitor arrived early. A jogger barreled into him like a caffeinated rhino. Nigel went down. The jogger didn't. "Oh, terribly sorry," Nigel gasped from the pavement, even though he was the one sprawled like a tragic Victorian heroine fainting at the opera. Jogger. "Watch it, mate." Nigel. "Yes. Sorry. Of course. Entirely my fault for existing." Voice 1. "Nice, Nigel. I should write him a card. Something tasteful. Dear Sir, apologies for obstructing your personal jogscape." He continued on. Apology count 7. At the bus stop, he apologized for standing too close to a woman, then for standing too far, then for breathing in a way that she seemed to find competitive. When the bus arrived and he stepped aboard, he apologized to the driver, the handrail, the Oyster card reader, after it beeped judgmentally, and the entire top deck by whispering, "Sorry, everyone," as though confessing to an unspoken crime. Apology count 14. He finally reached the office. Browning and Amp, Common Insurance, a place where enthusiasm went to die and paperwork went to breed. As he passed reception, he apologized to the front desk bowl of complimentary mints for taking one. He apologized to the lift button for pressing it harder than strictly necessary. He apologized to the lift itself when it groaned suspiciously, despite being more offended by the lift than it could ever be by him. Apology count 19. But the best was yet to come. Nigel entered the open plan office, the kingdom of Terence Hawthorne Biggs, CEO, tyrant, and owner of a haircut so sharp it could file taxes. Nigel only made it 3 steps before disaster struck. His rucksack brushed against a colleague's mug. The mug wobbled. The mug fell. The mug shattered dramatically, as if auditioning for an action film. Nigel froze, grief-stricken. "Oh no. Oh, I'm so sorry. Deeply sorry. Soulfully sorry. Universally sorry. I can replace it. I can mend it. I can attend its funeral. The colleague stared at him in stunned silence. Voice 1. Nice, Nigel. I should organize a memorial. Nothing fancy. Perhaps a slideshow celebrating its time with us. Terrence materialized behind Nigel like a tax audit given human form. You, Terrence said, pointing as if Nigel were a war criminal. My office, now. Nigel's stomach turned into something resembling mild soup. As he entered the office, Terrence leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled in the traditional pose of men who enjoy power far too much. Nigel, he said, do you know how many times you apologized last week? Nigel blinked. Is there a list? There shouldn't be a list. Is there a list? There's a list, Terrence said darkly, swiveling his monitor. 286, including 3 apologies delivered to the office printer. It jammed, Nigel whispered. And you apologized to it? Well, yes. I was in its way. Terrence sighed in the way only bosses who've lost all hope can sigh. You need to grow a spine, man. Voice 1. Nice, Nigel. I quite like my spine. It's reliable, quiet, unobtrusive. Terrence continued. Now get out there and try to go 1 hour without apologizing. 1 hour? Yes, Nigel. 1 hour. It's hardly Everest. Nigel nodded with the solemnity of someone accepting a medieval quest destined to end in their swift demise. He left the office, determined. He lasted 6 minutes. And the object he apologized to? A filing cabinet. Apology count, 42. He didn't even know filing cabinets had feelings until that moment. But perhaps they did. All those drawers. All that storage pressure. Voice 1. Nice, Nigel. Imagine being filled with other people's secrets all day. It must be exhausting. Nigel stood there, staring tragically at the cabinet, when something shifted inside him, like a faint rumble under the floorboards of his personality. Voice 2. Mr. Unhinged. What are you doing? Stop groveling. You look like a biscuit left out in the rain. Nigel blinked. The voice vanished. He dismissed it, naturally, because he was Nigel, Britain's nicest man. And voices of confidence did not simply appear in his head. He wished they would. He wished for many things. A backbone. A voice. A chance. He didn't know it yet, but all 3 were coming for him. And they would arrive in the form of a glowing blue vial delivered at midnight by a neighbor who owned an iguana named Mango the Destroyer. But for now, Nigel simply stood there apologizing to the cabinet again, unaware that his life, his politeness, his timidity, his entire quiet existence was about to explode in spectacular fashion. And all because he said, sorry, 42 times before breakfast. Chapter 2. The door-holding incident. To understand the magnitude of today's tragedy, one must understand that Nigel Pendergrass approached fire doors the way priests approach sacred relics, with reverence, caution, and an overdeveloped sense of responsibility. Fire doors, after all, were designed to save lives. Nigel could barely handle saving a seat on the tube. It was 9:28 a.m. when the great calamity began. Nigel, freshly scolded by Terrence for being terminally apologetic, was determined to prove himself. He would attend today's 9:30 meeting on time. Early even. He would stride into the conference room like a man with purpose and a functioning spine. Voice 1. Nice, Nigel. Today will be different. Today I will not be a jelly. A soft, apologetic jelly. I will be a firmer jelly. Perhaps even custard. He approached the heavy double doors leading to meeting room B. They swung open just as someone approached behind him. Acting on instinct, an instinct honed by decades of pathological courtesy, Nigel held the door. After you, he said, smiling politely, not realizing he had just sealed his own fate. A woman he had never seen before walked through the doorway, thanked him, and disappeared around the corner. Nigel stepped forward. Then another person appeared, and another, and another. Within 30 seconds, Nigel became a human doorstop. Voice 1. Nice, Nigel. It's fine. I'll just wait. No trouble at all. Lovely to be of use, really. A community pillar. A support beam. A hinge-adjacent hero. The trickle of people turned into a steady flow. Then a queue. Then something resembling an evacuation drill, except everyone was holding coffees and scrolling on their phones. Cheers, mate. Thank you. Oh, bless you. Nigel nodded, smiled, and kept holding the door as if performing penance for crimes he had yet to commit. By the time the 15th person walked through, Nigel checked his watch. 9:31. Voice 1. Nice, Nigel, meeting has started. But it would be monstrously rude to abandon the door now. These people depend on me. What if it closed on someone's elbow? What if it clipped someone's latte? A spill could ruin a day, a week, a life. A man with a lanyard full of keys and a mustache that suggested unresolved parental issues squeezed through the doorway, nodding to Nigel with the solemn acknowledgement of one martyr to another. Good lad, he said. Nigel felt both honored and imprisoned. Behind him, through the gap of the open door, he could see meeting room B filling with colleagues. Chairs scraping, papers rustling, Terrence's nasal voice declaring, "Let's begin promptly." Nigel tried stepping forward. But then, another person appeared from the corridor. A sprinting intern, clutching a laptop as if it were a newborn. Nigel froze mid-step, pivoted, and caught the door again. "Thank you," the intern squeaked. Nigel smiled with the dead eyes of a man who has accepted his destiny. Apology, count 48. A supervisor from Human Resources strolled by, carrying a clipboard and the self-satisfied air of someone who enjoys telling adults how to behave. "Still holding that door?" she asked. "Oh, well, you know," Nigel said, trying not to sound heroic. "Just doing my bit." "Good. We love team spirit." She walked away without assisting him in any useful way. Voice 1. Nice, Nigel. I should have asked her to relieve me. But how do you ask someone to abandon their clipboard journey? She seemed so purposeful. More people descended upon the doorway. Nigel felt his grip begin to weaken, his palms sweating against the cold metal. Then came the Deliveroo driver. He was holding a bag that looked like it contained enough food to cater a minor wedding. "Cheers, boss," he said as he barreled past. The bag smacked Nigel in the hip, leaving him with the imprint of a Tupperware container on his thigh. The meeting inside was now fully underway. Nigel could hear Terrence's voice getting sharper, the pitch climbing the way it only did when he sensed administrative weakness. At 9:40, someone finally slowed, looked at Nigel, and frowned. "Have you been standing here this whole time?" Nigel laughed nervously. "Oh, no. I've only just, well, relatively recently. I mean, just a short..." Before he could finish, another employee walked by, forcing him to catch the door again. Voice 2. Mr. Unhinged, let it slam. Let it crush them. The weak shall fear the door. Nigel swallowed. That voice again. He tried to ignore it. He tried to focus on the kind-faced woman now lingering near the threshold. "Do you need me to take over?" she asked kindly. Nigel nearly wept. "Yes, please," he attempted to say. What came out was, "Oh no, it's absolutely fine, but thank you ever so much for offering." Her smile faltered. "Are you sure?" "Completely," Nigel chirped, as if trapped in a polite hostage situation. She shrugged and walked on. Voice 1. Nice, Nigel. I deserve this. I should have let her take over. But then she'd feel guilty. And then I'd feel guilty for her guilt. And then the whole thing spirals. Time passed. People streamed. Nigel held the door. He felt his arm trembling now, muscles screaming, his soul slipping out of his body to take a cigarette break. At 9:48, a man with earbuds strolled past, not even acknowledging him. Voice 2. Mr. Unhinged, trip him. Voice 1. Nice, Nigel. No, absolutely not. That's rude. And possibly illegal. Or at least heavily frowned upon. At 9:55, the hallway finally emptied. The corridor fell silent. Nigel slowly lowered the door, hand trembling like a Victorian heroine lowering a lantern during a ghost story. He stepped back. He inhaled. He exhaled. He felt alive. Voice 1. Nice, Nigel. At last. I can go to my meeting. Perhaps I will slip in quietly. Perhaps no one will notice. Nigel opened the door to meeting room B. Every head turned. Terence glared at him with the intensity of a man discovering his favorite parking space occupied. "Nigel," he said coolly. "So kind of you to join us. We're nearly done." Nigel took his seat. He smiled weakly. He whispered, "Sorry." Voice 2. Mr. Unhinged, pathetic. Nigel didn't know whether that voice was his imagination or a warning. But he would soon learn this much. Politeness was no longer safe. His life was about to split in two. And in one of those lives, doors would hold him.